As we discussed over the last month about how to start the new year, 2012, what would be a good topic to carry on the tradition of the different presentations that we've had here over the years, and we decided that this would actually be a good topic because, you know, we are dealing with a huge problem, toxicity, in our modern world. Since World War II alone, over 100,000 different toxins have been produced and released into our environment. We don't have even the slightest clue of how all those toxins coming together and synergizing are really impacting us at various stages of our development, how it's impacting our children, women who are pregnant, adults, and as we age. How is it influencing the aging process? Because our goal is to speed the healing process and thereby slow down the aging process. We're seeking to optimize our health so that we can enjoy every moment of our lives. I recall some time back, I told some of you the story of, actually was a lady who I didn't think was very old. She was just in her early 60s. And she looked at me and she says, "Doctor, I don't want to live past 65. And I looked at her chart and I said, "That's just a couple years away." And she says, "Yes, I don't want to live past 65. So I knew that there was something going on there, and I wasn't going to get to the bottom of this because otherwise she probably wasn't going to live past 65. She had lost her hope of good health, so I asked her point blank. I said, "Why? Well, what's wrong?" And she said to me, "Because when I look at my relatives, as soon as they pass the age of 65, their health becomes such a burden to the rest of us. I do not want to be one of those people that's a burden to others in my family." And she came from a large extended family that was very close, and so that was her experience. And so I stopped and I looked at her and I said, "Mary, what if you were healthier at age 75 than most people were at age 55? It was a thought that had never crossed her mind. And she said, "Would you still want to die by age 65? And she said, "Well, no, that would be great." I said, "Well, that's what I hope to be doing with you, is help you accomplish that so that we dramatically turn back that biologic clock. We can't turn back the chronologic clock. We shouldn't even try. We'll be talking today about the importance of being true to chronobiology, to the circadian rhythms of nature around us, and how that influences our health and our ability to heal in a dramatic way. But we absolutely can turn back the biologic clock. And in order to do that effectively, we need to understand how the body deals with toxins and how the body is actually created to actually get rid of toxins even when we've been exposed to them. Because none of us in this room can completely get away from toxins. There are things that we can do to greatly limit our exposure to toxins, and those are things that we have a responsibility to do. But we need to take advantage of the new science of how the body is engineered to remove toxins properly. And there are many natural strategies that we'll be discussing today to help you do just that. Just recently, I was really excited when I was reading through a medical journal, and I saw a study that showed that a researcher at the University of Geneva, Dr. Pedro Herrera, had actually shown that type 1 diabetes was curable. Now, for those of you who understand diabetes, there's type 1 diabetes, there's type 2 diabetes, and there's even type 3 diabetes that we'll discuss in a little while. But type 1 diabetes is when the cells of the pancreas that make insulin, the beta cells, have been essentially destroyed. And if we don't have beta cells, you can't make insulin. Without insulin, your sugars will build up in the body to the point where death results, because the brain and other organ systems are literally starving for the lack of sugar. But what he discovered and what he has published over the last few years is that he can actually completely destroy all the beta cells, the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas. But then, if he removes the irritating factor, if he removes the chemical trigger that caused that horrible insult on the body's physiology, the ability to produce insulin, the body miraculously, the pancreas miraculously was able to regenerate beta cells. And it did it in an amazing way. It actually took another form of cell that was designed to do something totally different. And over several weeks and months, they were totally transformed into beta cells. Alpha cells of the pancreas transformed into beta cells. Now they were producing insulin. The key is removing the cause of the problem. And that's the trick. So oftentimes in healthcare, something is diagnosed and then we treat it at this superficial level, but we never stop to ask the question, what is the actual underlying cause of this problem? And it's usually not one thing. It's usually multiple things. And so we need to always stop and think, what could be, which factors could be involved in influencing this disease process? Just simply controlling blood sugars, as important as that is, actually doesn't address the cause of the problem at all. And so that's why I spent a lot of time working with people who have diabetes or pre-diabetes. And as we'll see in a little bit, a lot of the underlying problem has to do with the body's ability to deal with toxins. We're getting exposed to too many toxins, and our body is being overloaded and it has a lack of ability to remove those toxins properly. So, an underlying theme here is let's try to figure out the underlying cause of the problem. I've worked with individuals at risk of Alzheimer's and with families with family members that have Alzheimer's and other neurologic diseases. And they frequently ask me, can this be reversed? And of course, the first thing that we need to do is make sure, is there anything that we're missing? Is there some basic fundamental health practices that are being ignored? So oftentimes we're looking for that magic bullet when what we first need to do is deal with the fundamentals. And so that's why broad testing, broad evaluation of health. What are the obvious factors that could be fixed? That's where we need to go first. And the body has this innate ability to heal itself when we spend enough time focusing on that. Those of you who have come here before remember the studies that we discussed relative to the toxins in the brain that actually have been shown to be the initiating damage to the neurons, the brain cells, causing Alzheimer's. These toxins are collectively known as ADDLs, and what they do is they disrupt the communication between these nerve cells in the brain, so now they don't talk to each other anymore, and that causes death of these cells. But there is a simple, natural treatment, preventive strategy that keeps those cells communicating properly. And that is the prudent use of extra virgin olive oil. Why extra virgin? Because it's the first cold press of the oil that has all those amazing nutrients and phytochemicals. Chemicals that actually technically are not nutrients at all, but they have a dramatic effect on the body. And this oleocanthal chemical, it's not a vitamin, not a mineral, it's just a food-based chemical that's in the first pressing of the olive. It gets absorbed into the bloodstream and crosses the blood-brain barrier, and while in the brain, it attaches to this toxin that so commonly, so frequently, is insidiously causing dementia and Alzheimer's in our population. We live in an environment, we live in a nation where Alzheimer's has doubled in the last 10 years. And researchers predict that it's getting worse and worse. It's exponentially increasing. So our brain, our bodies are under attack. So what are the factors? What is attacking the brain? We need to understand that our toxic load has a huge influence on that. We also know that as various mechanisms of the body begin to break down, many times the brain cells can no longer use sugar properly. Did you know that the brain uses the vast majority of the carbohydrates in our diet? Especially if we're fairly sedentary, the brain is tremendously metabolically active and it is just absorbing and using as much of that sugar as possible to keep all those cells alive and functioning, keep our memory intact. So that's why we need a steady release of sugar into the bloodstream that comes from the liver, which requires a healthy adrenal gland and a healthy pancreas. That doesn't mean that we should be eating every 5 minutes. That doesn't mean that we should be eating every several hours. It means we should be eating regular meals, generally speaking 3 times a day, waiting typically 4 or 5 hours between meals. Optimally, why? Because that stabilizes the blood sugar when we're eating healthy, balanced foods to stabilize the blood sugar. By the way, the longer we wait in between meals, prudently speaking, the better the body is able to detoxify. Have you ever gone 3 hours from the last meal and you start feeling uneasy? Like, something's wrong. I'm not feeling right. And our natural inclination is to what? Is to gravitate to the refrigerator or to pull off the road and stop at a convenience store and get something to eat. And when we eat that, it changes the way we feel. Now we're kind of functioning a little bit better. What many times is happening is as the body has now gone through its digestive cycle, and is now going into its rest phase, where the digestive system is starting to rebuild its digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid and preparing for the next meal, the body actually has an opportunity to begin detoxifying. And as we detoxify, that detoxification reaction makes us feel uneasy. And now we want to eat something more to stop that detoxification reaction. So that's the very time that we need to be getting some fresh air, getting some water, getting a little bit of exercise to help improve and neutralize that detoxification reaction. The problem with the brain and not being able to properly use sugar is now being referred to as type 3 diabetes, which is basically another way of discussing the problem with Alzheimer's. So another natural remedy has come up relative to dealing with a brain that's no longer able to metabolize sugar properly, and so now it's starving. If we have enough of the healthy fats in our diet, in particular in this case, coconut oil, extra virgin organic coconut oil, it can actually turn the lights back on in the brain. There was one researcher whose husband was suffering the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, and she desperately was seeking to look at the research that she was privy to look at and seeing if there's anything on the horizon that her husband could take advantage of now. Don't you hate it when researcher says, maybe in the next 10 years we'll have some more information. So no, we want information now. What's your best guess now? Don't wait for some consensus development conference that's going to be adjourned 20 years from now. Let's figure out, based on the medical literature, what's the best scenario, what's the best objective information that we can apply right now. That's the whole basis of functional and nutritional medicine. Let's do our best now, not wait, not just defer to the next study and the next study and the next study. So this researcher decided that she was going to place her husband on this new medicine that was having phenomenal results in patients who had signed up for these clinical trials. But then she heard that the clinical trials had been stopped and the company was not going to do any additional research on this. She said, well, that's crazy, because she had been following this as a biomedical researcher. She'd been following the advance of the study, and she was shocked when the study had been discontinued because it had worked so well. So she started looking into what was actually in that medication and discovered that it was medium-chain saturated fats, otherwise known as coconut oil. And so the company had realized that once everybody knew that their expensive medication was coming from coconut oil, what were they going to do? Okay? And unfortunately, in today's healthcare environment, unless you can patent a medicine, they're not going to do any research on it. And that's why the most beneficial elements in nature will rarely be studied, because they're not patentable. So as we look at the total load that we're exposed to, this total load of toxins is influencing primarily our genes. I mean, we've heard that. We've known that for many, many decades. They cause genetic problems. But we never really understood what that meant. And so toxins can actually cause mutations in genes, which can cause birth defects and cause genetic inherited disorders and so forth. But the main problem with toxins is that they cause a disruption in the way genes normally work. They're not necessarily causing a mutation in that gene. They're just changing the way that gene works. So the genes that are there to protect us, to detoxify us, get stopped, get turned off. That's one of the major problems with toxins. They are endocrine or hormonal disruptors. They change the way enzymes work. Enzymes in our body are designed to be able to transform one element into another. It's just amazing what enzymes can do in our body. But if that enzyme has a toxin attached to it, that enzyme has a totally different structure and now is not able to do its normal function. And so the normal process, the intrinsic process of healing, and how God created our body to work is not capable of working anymore, because now a monkey wrench has been thrown into it. And that toxin is preventing the normal healing action that is available to us in our body. There's two main types of toxins that we're going to be looking at. Number one is exotoxins. Exotoxins are delivered to our body by food, water, air, environment, and lifestyle. So these are things that come from the outside and get placed into our body through some route. And that's the way we normally think of toxins, isn't it? But did you know that in many cases, one of the biggest problems with toxic load is the toxins that we generate inside of our own bodies? These are endotoxins. They're produced by our own body or by the bacteria that cohabitate within our body. Endotoxins. If I asked you what the number one cause of liver failure was, what would be your immediate thought? Alcohol. But actually it's not. Do you know that the number one cause of metabolic hepatitis in our bodies is what we eat. How we go about consuming a diet that changes the way the metabolism works. The most common cause of liver failure is called NASH. It's an acronym that stands for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. It's by far the most common form of hepatitis, and it is influenced by the lifestyle choices that we make or that we're exposed to. Now that's actually good news. In other words, we have a great opportunity day by day in every choice that we make to avoid the things that create a toxic load in our body and to enhance the body's ability to remove those toxins. One of the ways that we improve the liver's ability to deal with toxins is to make sure that our thyroid gland is functioning properly. Just this month, I wrote an article that was published in Neighbor's newspaper. You can actually go online to my website and you can download that. Actually, it's a link to the article on Neighbor's newspaper, page 39, where I talk about how to tune up the body for 2012. And I look at 5 different tests, laboratory tests that we can do to help us understand where the risk is. See, we need to focus our efforts on where the problem is. And so oftentimes, we get a yearly physical and we do the same thing. Check the complete blood count, check the metabolic profile, check the cholesterol lipid profile. Those are all valuable things to check. Okay? But if that's the only thing we check repeatedly, we're potentially missing the real problem. We've all heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we wonder why we're not as optimally healthy as we'd like to be. Why are we so tired? Why are we struggling with emotions or whatever it might be? So one of those 5 lists of tests is carefully evaluating the liver, not just with the standard liver thyroid stimulating test, but looking at the whole profile. And even then we might not discover what the problem is. Even then we might have to look more carefully at all the symptoms and family history, and from that determine natural strategies to enhance thyroid function, which can dramatically improve the way the liver works. And of course, the liver and the kidneys are critical detoxification organs. Over the last, every decade, the government conducts a huge study called NHANES, National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. They do an exhaustive survey of various populations across America and how different factors correlate to their health, what they're eating, what they're drinking, how they respond to various health concerns. And in this most recent government study, looking at thousands and thousands of individuals, a study caught my eye. We've always looked at weight as being one of the primary risk factors for diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc. And so, to the point where many doctors believe that if we just lost weight, that the diabetes would go away. But after 20 years of working carefully with people who struggle with diabetes, I've learned that while weight is definitely a factor, there are many other factors that are bigger than weight. There's underlying factors that influence this whole blood sugar metabolism, and this study helped us understand that. It showed that as the weight of various individuals in the population in the United States went up, the risk of diabetes indeed did go up. We've known that all along. But something very interesting, they also, in the same individuals, correlated the amount of toxins in their bloodstream. And you know that correlated far more strongly with the development of diabetes than did weight. Now, what's interesting here is that I believe that our exposure to toxin and our inability or a lack of ability to remove those toxins effectively from our body is a much greater risk factor for diabetes, heart disease, and cancer than weight is by itself. But those toxins are also, in many cases, the reason we struggle with weight or whatever it is that we struggle with. So based on our genetic predisposition, which may be weight or may be blood pressure, may be cholesterol, may be whatever, the toxic load is what activates and makes us more sensitive to that genetic predisposition. Another study recently showed that our exposure to arsenic dramatically increases our risk for diabetes. Now, I want you to raise your hand if you heard in the last month a news report that showed that the FDA was finally banning the use of arsenic in chicken feed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, okay? It was something that just made the news once. Just a little quick comment, and most of us missed it. Like, what? You know, if I hadn't known about it previously, I would have missed it as well. I go, what do you mean? You mean the FDA has been allowing the chicken farmers to use arsenic? Are you kidding me? So what's the reason for that? Why have they been using it? You know, the reality, thank you, weight gain. Okay, it's so we want a lot of arsenic too, right? So let's eat lots of chicken, and then we can gain a lot of weight. But hopefully we won't end up same place as the chickens did. I see the reality is that the chickens, the chicken farmers want the chickens to grow up rapidly so that they can get them off the market, right? It's an economic. And so now what's the value of arsenic then? Okay, besides the weight gain, why can the chickens gain weight if they actually are being treated with arsenic on a regular basis? You know, this is unfortunately all too common in healthcare. Is we like to use things that kill off, really effectively kill off bacteria and parasites and all kinds of bugs, and arsenic is really good at that. And if you're not sick, if the chickens don't get sick from these parasites and other bugs, they're more likely to grow up quickly. But we don't have to worry about those chickens developing Alzheimer's, right? From the arsenic. Because they would, but they don't live long enough to have to worry about the long-term repercussions of being exposed to a low-dose but steady diet of arsenic. Several doctors, Matthew Longnecker and Julie Daniels, both at the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, writing an exhaustive study on environmental contamination in diabetes, showed that arsenic actually damages the insulin receptors and decreases the ability of the muscle and liver to transport glucose from the blood into the cell. Many mechanisms through which arsenic damage. So it causes diabetes, but more importantly, it is a well-known neurotoxin. It is toxic to every aspect of our health. In another study with over 2,000 Americans, they were all evaluated for 6 of the most common POPs. Persistent organic pollutants. And when these individuals were classified according to their risk of developing diabetes compared to the amount of toxic exposure they had received by blood test evidence, the amount of persistent organic pollutants in their blood, when elevated, caused those individuals to have 38 times higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Now, let's just pause for a moment to understand what that means. In medicine, when we see something that a risk is increased 20 to 30%, we hear about it. Oh, don't do that, because that could increase your risk for cancer by 20%. And we go, whoa, okay, I won't do that. But we're not talking about a 30% increase here. We're talking about 38 times. That's 3,800% or thereabouts. And so we need to pay attention to the sources of these toxins and how we are going about dealing with them. So let's look at the natural remedies for dealing with toxins. Not too long ago, many of us here in this church were able to watch the movie Forks Over Knives, and hopefully many of you have even ordered your own copy and shared it with us. But we learned some amazing things from the research of Dr. Colin Campbell and the China study, and other doctors who have looked at the power of going on a plant-based diet and how that reverses heart disease and reverses diabetes. And so, you know what one of the powerful benefits of going on a whole plant food diet is? It dramatically enhances the detoxification potential of the body. Now, there's many reasons for that, and we'd be here all night if I took the time to go over all the different reasons and how many different foods influence this process. But that brings us to the first major natural remedy, and that's nutrition. There's many aspects of nutrition that provide this detoxification value. One of them is that if we eat primarily a whole food diet, which means we're getting lots of deep green leafy vegetables, we're getting lots of colorful whole vegetables, we're getting foods that have not been processed or fractionated or refined in any way. And if we eat a diet like that, we're going to be getting at least, or on average, 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C. Now, what is the RDA for vitamin C? Somewhere between, 60 and 90, and I don't even pay attention to that anymore because it's ridiculous. I mean, yes, it may effectively, for most of us, prevent scurvy, okay, which is important, which is valid. You know what scurvy is? Scurvy is a condition where you're so deficient in a given nutrient that the blood vessels actually break open and you bleed out of every orifice. The sailors who, for many months and years, were basically not able to get vitamin C into their system, their capillaries and blood vessels would get very brittle. The connective tissue that holds their bloodstream together would just disintegrate, and they would literally just bleed out everywhere. Are you comfortable taking just enough of a nutrient to prevent this most horrendous condition? Okay? No, I am not comfortable with that. I want to make sure that I'm getting an optimal amount. It's just like saying, if you just ate once a month, you'd probably stay alive for quite a while. But we wouldn't really have much energy, right? I mean, we have to think about how do we optimize the body's ability to heal and to slow down the aging process. And so a healthy diet is really going to give us a lot of vitamin C. And so that's why we need to have plenty of vitamin C. And one of the things that I recommend to anybody that shows signs of toxicity, any chronic disease that is not effectively being managed is a sign of some type of toxicity, in my opinion. And vitamin C, we know, is an amazing nutrient that neutralizes toxins. So that's why if somebody gets sick with a flu or a cold, and we just get that malaise, and we just feel so bad. Why do we feel bad? Because of toxins. These viruses and bacteria, whatever they might be, are just having a heyday, reproducing and releasing toxins, and our body is being influenced by these toxins. And vitamin C, taken multiple times throughout the day, will literally neutralize those toxins. It's not necessarily curing the disease. It's helping your body deal with the disease more functionally so that your body's innate immune system can destroy the disease effectively. Okay, so that's one of the many reasons. Another one is the fact that we need to be on a diet that is rich in fiber, that has at least 40-45 grams of whole food fiber a day. Now, some people think, I got the fiber thing figured out. I just take Metamucil twice a day and I'm good. Okay? Now, if you want to take Metamucil twice a day, that's fine with me. I have no problem with that, as long as it doesn't have aspartame in it. And check it out. Most of them actually have artificial sweeteners in them. And that would completely negate the overall benefit, in my opinion, all right, because we have to look at how is all these things affecting our health. So we're actually taking in toxins to try to increase the body's ability to get rid of toxins. So what's the real value of fiber? Is it just a bulking agent so that we can have a regular bowel movement? Well, that's one of the benefits, certainly. But really, fiber has so much more to offer us. Fiber is actually converted in the colon into a fat. Did you know that? The healthy bacteria in our colon, when present abundantly, will take fiber and enzymatically convert it into a fat. Now, you might be thinking, whoa, I need to decrease my fiber intake then, because I have a problem with that. Right? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. This is a healthy fat. This is a fat that actually dramatically lessens your risk of cancer, your risk of heart disease, that optimizes your immune system, and we even know how it does it. The bacteria converts the fiber into butyric acid, a special short-chain fat. That fat gets absorbed into the cells of the colon, and it turns on a gene that turns off another gene that is associated with the promotion of colon cancer. So through the mechanism, actually dramatically lessens our risk for colon cancer. The same fat that's been converted from fiber floats to the bloodstream, goes to the liver, and tells the genes in the liver, hey, let's stop producing so much cholesterol. I think we're okay. I don't think we need to keep producing so much cholesterol. And if necessary in us, it can help regulate that cholesterol production. So fiber is one of the ways that we can genetically re-engineer our personal risk for disease or illness. High fiber foods pack all kinds of nutrients. What is the king of all foods? What is the king of all foods? Legumes, beans, peas, and lentils. Why? Because, I'm talking in general now. Obviously, some people have a challenge, but if it's just a digestive problem, we got to fix the digestive problem. Yeah, because beans are an amazing therapeutic food for the vast majority of us. Unless we have a specific allergy to it, we need to fix that digestive issue and use legumes effectively. Why? Because it has 3 times more fiber, especially soluble fiber, than most other high-fiber vegetables. It has 3 times more healthy protein than most other foods. And it's loaded in magnesium and potassium. And do you know that magnesium and potassium are key detoxificating or nutrients in our body? Magnesium is critical because toxins like to be where magnesium is supposed to be. Toxins love to hook up to enzymes and protein systems in our body and hormones where magnesium is supposed to be, but so many of us are so deficient in magnesium that toxins have it easy. They don't have to compete. They just, hey, I would just hook in right here and here. And once the toxins hook up, they do not want to let go. Sound familiar? And we'll be looking at, in a little bit, the power of other toxins in our body that don't want to let go, that are stubborn in their persistence of holding on to the past, holding on to those tissues where they constantly, 24/7, every minute of the day and night, are generating free radicals. Why? Because that's what toxins do. They're good at releasing and spewing forth free radical oxidative stress that damages every organ system in the body. Yesterday, I gave the same talk in San Marcos, and a gentleman came up to me afterwards, and he said to me, he says, I need to talk to you because I was on a medicine that was creating toxicity within me. He was in the special fighting groups in Iraq, and he's going through a lot of post-traumatic stress syndrome. We really got to try to understand what our men and women in the military have gone through over the last many years, and it's just horrific what many of them have gone through and what they have witnessed. And so they're struggling with all these emotions and trying to lead a normal life, but they have all this baggage that affects, this toxic baggage. Real toxins, I shouldn't say real, typical physical toxins that they've been exposed to, but also emotional toxins that create horrible free radical damage in their bodies. And he says, I was taking lithium because of my bipolar issue, but I can't take it anymore because it was causing a toxicity. You know what? That legumes, beans, peas, and lentils actually are the food source that has the highest amount of natural lithium in it. Now, it's not going to be enough lithium to treat his bipolar disorder. That's not my point. My point, though, is that the more we consume a whole plant-based diet, the more we're going to be getting thousands and hundreds of thousands of chemicals we don't even understand yet that are literally activating genes in the right direction and helping our body detoxify and helping normalize emotional challenges and other challenges in our lives. So I gave him some recommendations, some natural recommendations that would actually work far better than what he had been doing. We know that individuals who eat lots of deep green leafy vegetables, especially as we get older, are much more likely to have a vibrant memory. Individuals at the Rush Institute in Chicago who were over 65 years of age and ate at least 2 servings of dark green vegetables every day, had a memory that was at least as good as individuals more than 5 years younger than them. They had a 40% better condition. In fact, they declined 40% more slowly than any of the individuals who were not consuming those foods on a regular basis. Okay, the next antitoxin, I guess we could call it, would be exercise. Some researchers have theorized that the most powerful antitoxin is exercise, and there's good reasons for what they say, because when we exercise properly, and we exercise on a daily basis to the point of a good sweat. See, sometimes we think, oh, I'm exercising. I take my dog outside twice a day. Okay? And I do that too. But I assure you I don't get much exercise from that. Even if you're walking the dog, you're getting some activity. And that's good for us to do that, but it's not generally going to break a sweat, right? Unless it's a big dog and he likes to run fast, right? And then it's probably more dangerous to do the walk than not do it. But so one of the values of exercise is when we sweat, we literally are detoxifying. The sweat pores open up, and we're literally removing heavy metal toxins like arsenic, like mercury, like lead, like cadmium. And so that's why many great generals of the past had a rule that every day, every soldier in my army breaks a sweat. In other words, you need to work out long enough to break and have a good sweat. So that's an important principle of detoxification. By the way, if you're not one that sweats very easily, then we need to find out why. Is it possible that maybe the thyroid gland isn't working properly? And many times with a low-functioning thyroid, even when you're exercising harder, you don't sweat very much. It's well known in exercise physiology circles that the fittest athletes will sweat sooner and sweat more than the less fit individuals. Because there's a benefit of sweating. You're actually removing toxins and helping the body function the way it should. But if we're going to sweat every day, we need to make sure that we drink plenty of water. And that brings us to the fourth natural remedy, the importance of drinking pure, clean water. If we don't have enough water in our system, we cannot flush the toxins away. It's a critical concept. There's always individuals that will say, well, I just don't feel like drinking water. But see, this is an important concept for us. Health and wellness isn't necessarily about what feels right. In fact, I would dare to say that many times for us to be truly healthy and truly well, we need to disregard what feels right and focus on what we know is right. That's a real challenge for us, isn't it? Because humanly speaking, we're not wired that way. We just keep thinking, well, I just didn't really feel like eating, so I didn't eat. I didn't really feel like drinking. I was just waiting until my body told me that I was thirsty, because that seems to be the most natural way. But see, that's why God gave us a brain to think through what is best rather than what we feel like. Remember that commercial? Well, I think it was a Sprite commercial. Follow your thirst. Boy, if that isn't one of the worst lies and deceptions in our world today. If we followed our thirst, and even just a few of the things in our lives, just think of all the problems and challenges that we've developed. If we followed our thirst and any inclination that came our way, this would be a very, very dangerous world. And it already is. Why? Because so many people are following their thirst. They're following their feelings. They're just doing what seems to be right, what seems to feel right to me, as opposed to what is right. So we need to come up with a plan. And so as I work with my patients, I strongly encourage them, and I concentrate on that myself, because it's so easy to get off track, that we don't follow our feelings, we follow our plan. Every week we sit down and reevaluate our plan and say, how is this plan working? And if we're not insane, I hope that we would recognize, wow, this plan may not be working as well as I thought it might work originally, which now requires us to make an adjustment to that plan. Maybe to get a better evaluation. Maybe to get a different evaluation to see what's really going on underneath all this, all the other risk factors that we thought we didn't have. Many people think they're healthy because every time they get their cholesterol checked, it's 125, 140. So, hey, I'm healthy. All those other people with cholesterols above 200, they're not healthy. Guess what? It doesn't work that way. Okay? Because there's so many things that influence our health, we need to look at life a little bit more broadly. So one of the things I remember the most from college organic chemistry is I was wondering how I was going to clean up after one experiment, and I went up to Dr. Anderson, and I said, Dr. Anderson, what should I use to clean up this chemistry experiment? And he looked at me and said, Youngberg, what have I been teaching you all these weeks? And so I thought real hard, and I wasn't sure what he was getting at, and he said, what's the number one solvent in the world? And so I'm thinking, oh man, it's got to be something really rare. It's got to be high. What is it? And so he looked at me and said, Youngberg, it's water. And if that doesn't work, you add some soap to it. And then the third one was acetone. That was a little bit harder, but it's water is the number one solvent in the world, and so many of us are missing an opportunity to detoxify simply because we're not thirsty. Do not trust your thirst. I had the privilege, and maybe the pain, of running the very first LA Marathon in 1986. I did it again the next year, took a break, did it the fourth year, and then decided, basketball is a lot more fun than marathons. So, but I remember that very first marathon as I talked to the experts about how to plan out my run. You just don't go and do it. You got to plan it out, just like our wellness. You have to plan it. You don't go by feeling. You don't think, if I could just get in front of the pack at the beginning, I'm going to be okay. No. People who get in front of the pack at the beginning, they oftentimes never even finish. They never even cross the 10K mark sometimes because they hadn't planned appropriately. We have to plan in a way where we're finishing strong, not just starting out strong. Well, I learned that if you ever get thirsty during a run, if you ever get thirsty while you're in a race, you've just lost a race. And not only lost a race, but you have destroyed any potential of you reaching your optimum race pace. Gone. You can't let yourself get thirsty in a race. And so I'm suggesting to you today, don't let yourself get thirsty throughout the day. Start out the morning with 1 to 2 glasses or a mug of hot water, warm to hot water. It works better than coffee. And if you don't believe me, just try it. Okay? And if you still have to use the coffee, do it afterwards. Okay? But, you see, the problem with coffee is that it doesn't detoxify you. It actually dehydrates you. Okay? The caffeine dehydrates us, and we're missing the opportunity to truly detoxify in the process. Then about mid-morning, we drink another glass or two of maybe cold water at this point. Mid-afternoon, the same, maybe a half hour before meals, a little bit of water, so we don't feel like drinking. If you drink that water the way I've suggested, you will rarely feel like drinking during the meal, because typically we wait into the meal, and about 3 bites into the meal, we go, man, I think I'm thirsty. And so you get a tall glass of ice water, wash that food down, and now it takes forever for that food to digest because the digestive enzymes have been significantly compromised due to all that dilution. So, now if you're thirsty when you eat, don't say, well, I can't drink anything because Dr. Youngberg said it would destroy my digestion. And if you're thirsty while you're eating, it's too late to worry about destroying your digestion. You need to drink. Maybe you should have some water and wait a while before you eat. But, we all live busy lives. So drink if you're thirsty, but plan ahead so you don't have to suffer the consequences of dehydration. Then we look at sunlight and the power of sunlight and just calming our nerves and being one of the best mood regulators available. We live in a state of our country where most every day of the year we can take advantage of some wonderful therapeutic sunlight. The ability to sleep effectively at night is first established by how much time you spend outside in the bright light. Getting outside for at least half an hour a day, not all at once necessarily, but maybe a little walk after breakfast, a little walk after lunch, a little walk after supper. Just that bright light will dramatically improve the ability of your pineal gland at night to release melatonin in the darkness. And so the health of the nighttime rehealing, rejuvenating experience is determined in part by whether we are in the sunlight during the day. And so often, even though the sun is shining brightly outside, we go day after day after day without getting outside for more than 15, 20 seconds between the house and the car and the store, and so forth. So take advantage of that natural remedy. Sunlight is also important because that's where all vitamin D comes, from the sun. And studies have recently shown, and I was very intrigued by this recent study, that researchers had found, in fact, Dr. Ron Evans from the Salk Institute and researchers from the University of Arizona found that vitamin D actually was absorbed into the cells of the colon, and they turned on a gene in the cells of the colon that activated the detoxification process. See, God has created within our system the power of detoxification, but we have to turn it on. We have to do our part to expose ourselves to the lifestyle nutritional factors that optimize that detoxification process. We've known for decades that the level of vitamin D in the blood dramatically influences the risk of colon cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, many other cancers, and many, many other conditions. That's why everybody should be checking their vitamin D levels in the fall and in the winter, and in the spring rather. And if you've never checked it before, right away. Get it checked, because that is one of the most powerful regulating factors of your immune system and anti-cancer process. A sixth or a fifth natural remedy is temperance. You can't talk about toxins without talking about temperance, right? I mean, temperance is essentially avoiding things that are harmful in any amount. And those would be, I think most of us would agree that cigarettes are harmful in any amount. Yes, smoking actually helps people in many ways. It helps calm stress. It helps deal with anxiety. It helps people in many, many ways. It's really unfortunate that smoking is toxic, because otherwise it does a lot of good things for people. But we have to look at the benefits versus the risks. And so anybody who's ever smoked before knows that, man, there was some real benefit of smoking. That's why it's so hard to quit. Okay? But in life, as in health, as in life, we need to ask the question, what are the hard decisions that I need to make? I may need to give something up that, man, is a really great and amazing thing. Why? Because it has a huge downside to it. And because it is actually, even though it has so many benefits, it's actually killing me slowly. What are those things in my life? What are those things in your life? Temperance also involves, though, using in moderation things that become toxic when used in excess. What are those things in our lives? We need to keep those things under control. And that's why it's so hard for us to deal with foods. And so it's so hard to deal with diets, because everybody's got to eat. You can't just say, I'm not going to eat anymore. Right? Because we have to eat. And so it's important that we pay attention to temperance. Just 3 more natural remedies, and then we'll eat. Power of air. Bottom line is that we need to be taking advantage of deep breathing. Just deep breathing, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out for a minute, that's a powerful detoxification strategy. It's powerful for the frontal lobe of the brain, helps the brain get focused, and helps the body remove toxins more rapidly. In fact, the lungs are really the most important detoxification organ of all, which means that we need to pay attention to breathing deeply from the diaphragm, which means we need to pay attention to how we stand and how we sit. We need to pay attention to how well the body circulates blood throughout the body, because we cannot have perfect health unless we first have perfect circulation. And we can't have perfect circulation if we're not breathing deeply, if we're not breathing optimally. Fresh air, walking along the beach where the water is lapping on the shores, creating negative ions, powerful for the brain. Walking in tree-lined areas, especially evergreens, they generate negative ions, which is powerful for the detoxification process. And then we go to rest. That's a tough one. Rest. I think it's one of the most powerful strategies because it's one of the ones that we abuse the most. Some of us are really good about going to bed at a certain time and getting up early, and you've developed that over the years. But many of us struggle with that. Many of us don't feel good until it's after 10 o'clock at night. We're going, man, why would I go to bed now? It's the only time I feel good. Right? But see, that's actually a clue that we need to pay attention to this axiom that it's not about how you feel. Okay? It's about what we know to be best for us. This whole field of chronobiology, of how timing influences things, about how the circadian rhythms of nature around us, and when the sun goes down and when it gets dark around us, and then when the sun comes up, those have huge influences on our health, and we need to pay attention to that. It's critical that we get outside. If we're struggling with any health issue, one of the very powerful strategies is to get outside first thing in the morning. As it lightens up, as the sky lightens up and the sun starts to come up, getting outside and just enjoying being in the sun. Okay? And of course, if we're exercising, getting some fresh air, and we've had our mug of hot water already, we're on a good start for the day if we do that. But we've all heard of the death by overwork syndrome, that who read stories about that Japanese worker who's found dead at their desk from just working themselves to death. We need to have vacations. We need to have that extended yearly vacation. We need to have those quarterly vacations. That's where we get, winter break and spring break and Thanksgiving and all the. We need to have these vacations and plan to do something enjoyable with the people that we love during those times. Those are very powerful detox strategies. We need to pay attention to the cycles of life. Well, we have the daily cycle and the monthly cycles and the quarterly cycles and the yearly cycles, but where did the weekly cycle come from? That's a question that authorities and government officials in France during the French Revolution asked. Well, wait a minute. Why are we giving all these workers weekends off? We could get a lot more done for our economy if we changed the work week from 7 days to 10 days. Because, you know what, they knew that there was no biologic, or at least apparent biologic reason for the weekly cycle. Except, where did it come from? Yeah, it came from, we can read about it in the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings, that the weekly cycle was actually designed for us to remember that we have been created by a loving God. For us to remember, that there's purpose for us in our lives. That there's a special purpose for each of us right now, and that we have a special purpose in the future as well. And it's a total different mindset compared to the secular mindset. The weekly, the only basis, think about it, only basis for the weekly cycle comes from the Word of God. And for those of us who commit ourselves to optimize our health, benefit so greatly by recognizing that we have an amazing purpose. So the weekly cycles help us in the detoxification. So last of all is this question of trust. So we've been going over the New Start acronym of the 8 natural remedies of detoxification. Let me end with this statement. One of the most maligned individuals in the history of this earth was Jesus Christ. And because of what he stood for, the religious leaders of his day did not want him to stay alive. And they were looking for ways to get him in trouble with the people around him that seemed to revere him so much. And they were trying to get him in trouble with something that his disciples had done. And Jesus turned to them and said, what goes into a man's mouth does not make him unclean. But what comes out of his mouth, that is what makes him unclean. I don't think that he was referring to that we could eat anything we wanted and not have any consequences. I don't think that's what he was talking about. Within context, he was recognizing that the most powerful toxin, the most deadly toxin that commonly we are exposed to, is really what's going on in our minds. I just had mentioned that toxins, by their very nature, hold on to the tissues. They hold on to those enzyme systems, and they prevent them from working properly. And they won't let go unless there is a significant effort or attempt to follow the strategies that help flush that toxin out of that cell and out of the body. But one of the most important toxins that we struggle, you and I struggle with every day, is the toxins that are the endotoxins that are generated by the way we think. If you want to read a book this year that will change your life, it's a book written by Dr. Neil Nedley, an internist, and actually a gastroenterologist as well, who has devoted much of his time in the last 10 years to studying the power of thought on health. And he has just published a book called The Lost Art of Thinking. How we think has a powerful influence on our health, and we could talk another hour about this, and we don't have that time. But let me just say that hostility, bitterness, anger, revenge, jealousy, these negative emotions are literally toxins. Not just emotionally speaking. Because they are emotions, they are chemically, physically toxic to the body. They generate free radical damage in the body. And if we want to develop a healing system, if we want to optimize our body's ability to heal itself, that's the first thing that must be addressed, is recognizing that how we think about life and our interpersonal relationships with each other, at family, at work, or wherever it might be, is the most powerful toxic factor that we need to deal with. Hostility is another way of saying inflammation. Have you ever heard a statement, that was very inflammatory, what you just said? It was inflammatory because they actually caused inflammatory damage, toxic damage in the body. And so, as a man thinketh, so is he. So we have an opportunity in this new year to actually pause and think about our values. Okay? How we act towards others. What we say about ourselves. Learning to think effectively. Learning to think critically. And learning to avoid telling ourselves mistruths. That's one of the biggest challenges that creates toxicity in the body is the lost art of learning to tell ourselves the truth. I'll discuss in that book. I greatly recommend that. So it's been a pleasure for me to share what I believe are some of the most important strategies to impact our body's ability to detoxify. And I look forward to eating with you this evening and also to taking some time after the meal to go through question and answers. So let's end with a word of prayer, if we may. Father, thank you for the realization that you have created us, created our bodies in such an amazing manner to be able to heal itself. Just help us to better understand tonight and throughout this year how to best strategize, to take advantage of this amazing biochemistry and physical machinery that you've put into our bodies so that we can optimize our health for this new year, so we can be better and more effective at taking care of each other and serving you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.